Three R's, which I use to this day: recognize, release, and refocus. Anytime we're faced with something that throws us off our game, an adversity, a setback, a fear, a distraction, a frustration, we've got to recognize it, right? We've got to first identify what is it and sit with it for a bit, especially when we have the time and the bandwidth to do so. Once we've processed it, then we've got to find a way to release, to let it go. Clench the fist and release it, or some sort of kinesthetic mechanism, can be really valuable. While swimming, I couldn't always do that, so sometimes I'd just forcefully exhale into the water and just get it out. And then refocus. What is it that I'm doing? What is my aim here? Right? Sometimes we can just refocus on the movement itself. Right? For me, focusing on something technical, like keeping a good high elbow catch on my stroke underwater and visually seeing that, was a great way to refocus. If we're in the boardroom on an intimidating call with a client, maybe the refocus is our notes. Maybe it's just rolling the shoulders back. If we're weightlifting, if we're approaching the barbell, maybe we have a focal point, something that we can look out to off to the distance, something that we can place our gaze on. Whatever that is, that third R is really where we land. So this might sound funny, being someone that spent, really 2 decades pursuing a career in open water swimming, but my biggest fear still to this date is sharks. And of course, if you're afraid of sharks, anytime there's a large body swimming with you, you think it's a shark, even if it's cute like this. No, we had quite a few harbor seals and California sea lions that were curious about what we were up to, and would sometimes come around. And it was an incredible experience, but always spiked my heart rate through the roof, like unsustainable heart rate, like in the 200s. I used to wear a Garmin so I could track the data. And it would take a bit to come back down to a more sustainable pace, but I knew that this was a skill I needed to work on, because if you're doing a marathon swim and you find your heart rate in the 200s, you have problems. Now and later also. So I knew I needed to work on this. So I ended up meeting with a sports psychologist at Cal State Fullerton. This is where I was teaching post-grad school, and started meeting with this professor. And he taught me about exploring your fears rather than allowing them to encompass you, right? Moving towards them and really learning about them. When he suggested this, right, that maybe I explore a little bit about shark behavior, maybe learn a little bit, maybe study them, maybe look at what they look like, I was terrified. I was like, that's the last thing I want in my browser history, right, is anything to do with shark. I don't want to see a picture of a shark. Like, looking at this would have spiked my heart rate back then. But he persisted. No, I think it'll really be helpful if you can just, develop a little bit more knowledge around sharks, what they're motivated by, how they behave, what an aggressive shark looks like, what a non-aggressive shark looks like, what are instances under which they typically attack. And it helped. It was incredible. I finally leaned in and started exploring my fear. We developed what were called fear statements. We knew that if we saw something, we needed to have a couple of tools to come down from that heart rate spike, to get back into sustainable marathon swimming. The shark you see isn't the one that's going to get you, right? This guy was not worrisome for us. If you make it to the beach, you've already beaten the odds. This was great for a Southern California swimmer, right? Like, the traffic and the freeways and all of that. Like, if I got there to the beach, I'd beaten the odds for the day. Just learning about statistics and risk and incidents, right, was far more likely to be harmed in some other type of way. Make your decision on the beach. One of my mentors that was another marathon swimmer taught me that as you're putting on your cap and goggles, that's a great time to review risk and reward. Is this swim worth the risk? And so this was part of my routine as I prepared for this swim. And so at 4 in the morning when we were getting our stuff on, I was going over it in my mind. I know the risks, we've talked about it, we have a plan for it, but I also know the reward and why I'm doing it. I know what my purpose is here. The one that really helped me, and the one that I worked hard to not just plan and prepare for, but use. Might sound silly, but people pay good money for this. And what it meant to me is, People do pay enormous amounts of money to go shark diving and to go view sharks. And we move heaven and earth to make that happen for a lot of people by putting sharks in captivity or chumming the oceans and then bringing people around them, both of which are really bad for the creatures. I was getting to do this in their environment. Mother Nature was allowing me into this space, and this shark was choosing to spend its day with us. This is an unforgettable experience I was never going to forget. I can still see it, the outline of it and the way it moved. And so as I kind of leaned into my breathing and leaned into these fear statements, I was finally able to get composure by realizing how fortunate this was. What if I became a 2-time failure? Those are sometimes the thoughts that we battle, even when we're trained to think about high-level mental performance and teach it all the time. I still had those thoughts. One of the things that we really focused on was this idea of presence and this idea of not needing to know the end of my story. And I had to make peace with that. And anytime we face uncertainty, which is the root of a lot of stress, fear, and anxiety, we have to make peace with, I may not know the end of this story. And that's okay. I don't need to.